It's 5 o'clock, and that means it is time for a very jam-packed strategy session. This is your look behind the headlines and behind the polling with actual political strategists to give you the news behind the news and to help you better understand what's actually happening in America's crazy political world. I'm Democratic strategist Max Burns, and I'm joined by the man who reinvented campaigning himself, Mr. Joe Trippi. Joe Trippi here behind some of the campaigns that have become textbook examples of how to do it right. Jerry Brown's comeback in 2010 in California, Doug Jones in Alabama in 2017, which we'll talk about in just a second. Joe, how are you?
Great to be with you, Max.
I'm so excited to have you here because I feel like everything that's happening today is so perfectly aligned with your experiences. Now, stop me if you've heard this, Joe, but I think a lot of people have been hearing for over a year that this Senate map is bad for Democrats. It's an uphill fight. To lower your expectations, things can only get worse. But there are some recent polls coming out that show quite the opposite story. A lot of races now moving towards Democrats. The Cook Political Report just moving 4 races towards Democrats, including Ohio and North Carolina, Georgia moving, Iowa as well. And there are quite a few others. And I'm curious, as someone who has been talking about this shift for months before the mainstream media caught on to it, what do you make of these sudden changes towards Democrats?
Well, one, I don't think they've been all that sudden. I think the map, the map on paper doesn't look great. But way back, I mean, we've got our first taste of this in November of last year in New Jersey and Virginia. And I said at the time, the two things that really popped out to me was the double haters in both those states. People who hate both parties were voting. I mean, which is crazy. Double haters never vote because, like, if you don't like Trump and you don't like Harris, then you don't like either party. They end up staying home. Yeah. They not only came out. I think back then it was about 12 or 13% of the electorate in those states. They were voting 8-2 for the Democrat in Virginia, Spanberger, or New Jersey's Mikey Sherrill, 8-2 for the Democrats. And that just said to me that and by the way, CNN, I think, just released a poll. Now that's a poll, not votes. These were actual votes in Virginia, New Jersey. That poll showed the discovery of double haters about a week ago. CNN discovered the double haters and was talking about how they were like amazingly 58% of double haters are voting in the poll, saying it generically they'd vote for the Democrat, 22% for the Republican, and 17% are undecided. If you actually think about that 17%, if they don't show, that 56 turns into 80, and if they do show, they break towards the same way. So no, I think that's been out there for quite a while. And I think you're now starting to see it because now as more polls come out in some of these states. And then the other thing that was clearly going on back then, and I've been talking about it for months, we've been talking about on this show, was there was a dramatic break with independents that started after Epstein. And I can't explain. The last place, because Epstein happened, it wasn't that Republicans bolted right away. Also, Democrats already 95-5 were against Trump. And so, it didn't, the Bondi saying, I'm not going to show you anything, it didn't change any of their minds. But you saw independents start to break, and the break has accelerated over time. And even back then in New Jersey and Virginia, 67% of independents were voting for the Democrat, or 70%, I think, in Virginia. That's not normal. Usually it's 53-47 voted for Trump, and 53-47 of independents voted for Biden, and back and forth. No, this is, and that, by the way, is no longer anywhere near where it's showing up in polls. Now, in some polls, independents are as low as 18%, 22% approval of Trump. It's a drag. And so those two things are pretty important to understand. And then on top of that, you get that clearly the energy advantage in terms of Democrats turning out in larger numbers and Republicans just not showing up in these specials in the midterm votes so far. And that's something we've seen before. So you see those three things. It's like the trifecta of not, I don't think, a blue wave. What I call it is a wave of change. I mean, because it's not just Democrats, a big, massive wave, but it's independents joining with Democrats and increasingly soft Republicans starting to move too. And so, yeah, where we have candidates like Sherrod Brown and John Ossoff wasn't even talking about Georgia being in play anymore because of these shifts. And in fact, I think, I was out in Iowa. I did a bunch of shows on the ground in Iowa, and you could tell. I mean, I think the fourth seat is going to be the Iowa Senate seat. I mean, there's a reason Joni Ernst did not run for re-election, and Hinson is in a dead heat with either of the two, Josh Turek or Zach Walz, two great candidates. They're fighting it out. They're going to have a tough primary, like we saw with Tallarico and Crockett in Texas. But the winner is going to be a formidable force, and I think win that seat, particularly because Rob Sand, who we talked about on this show, the governor candidate for in Iowa, is just running circles around the Republicans right now. And I think he's going to lead to more than just the Senate seat there, but 2 or 3, maybe even 4 House seats flip.
Yeah, and both of the Democratic contenders in Iowa within the margin of error against their opponent in the latest Iowa poll. Republicans just came out with this big $350 million nationwide Senate action plan last week, and that anticipated independents breaking much more evenly. Now we're seeing this latest Quinnipiac poll shows the net negative approval rating for Donald Trump of -43 among independents. Yeah. That's actually a point lower than Richard Nixon in his last poll in August 1974, where he was -42 with independents. I mean, how do Republicans strategize running a race with a president that unpopular with such a huge demographic?
Well, I think if you're Lisa Collins, Susan Collins, excuse me, or Lisa Murkowski, it might be time to actually talk about calling for him to resign or impeaching him, voting to impeach him, because that might be the way to save yourself. But otherwise, I think if you're up this year, some of them aren't, but if the Republicans that are up this year start looking for another job, because I think a lot of them, this reminds me of 1980, the other way. Carter, we had the Carter presidency that was under tremendous pressure, the misery index, inflation, oil shock, the Iran hostage situation, a lot of parallels to what we're seeing today, and the unpopularity of the president. And most people went to sleep that night, election night, thinking that there were 2 or 3 Democrats senators who were going to lose, went into that night thinking that. And when they woke up the next morning, 8 or so U.S. senators, 4 or 5 of which no one thought were in any kind of trouble, lost their, were kicked out of office. And we're talking about big names, giants in the Senate. I think that same thing's going to happen this cycle. I know everybody says, bad math. No, I think, I think Iowa will be one of those places. You saw in the Florida poll, Vindman is actually in a dead heat in Florida, along with Jolly against Donald in the governor's race there. Like I said, I think we got a headline of the governor's race in Iowa that that race. I said a month or so ago when I interviewed Rob Sand that he was one of the strongest candidates I've seen coming up in the party. And it's all these things are combining. Jolly and Vindman are the two competitive governor and Senate candidate. Not sure either of them can overcome a lot of the sort of registration obstacles, but they're doing it right now. They're in a dead heat. And so even that one, I would not rule out that Vindman doesn't pull that one out. And that's before you get to a lot of other places like, we'll see if Texas, but Iowa for sure. But no, I think in my view, there'll be there's Republican senators who do not know they're in trouble right now, or just finding out and figuring it out. And I don't see a whole lot of ways for them to save themselves, given what's going on with the war in Iran. None of them have done anything to rein Trump in. They're not going to. And so I think, gas prices are going to increase. The same thing with fertilizer costs, tractor parts. I mean, farmers are in trouble, are hurting. That's what I saw out in Iowa. It was amazing to me when I was out there, Trump had collapsed to a -12 approval rating, -12 point. And this is a place where he had, double digit favorable, going into that election. So I think it's a much different environment than what most. I think the mainstream media is just barely catching up. They still doing, hey, what are Democrats going to do about their toxic brand? And I keep saying, yeah, well, look at the double haters, because I'm not saying there's no problem with the Democratic brand, but if you think it's toxic, then when they're voting 8-2 for Democrats, it would seem to be indicating there's something a hell of a lot more toxic out there that you haven't seen one story about. What are Republicans going to do about their toxic brand? That's the MAGA and Trump are the most toxic brand in politics in America right now. And you still have the mainstream media doing, yeah, we went to this Democratic thing. What are they going to do? Well, first we're going to start by like I said, forget about the blue wave. I think the American people have had enough. Independents definitely had. They're voting almost like Democrats right now. I mean, 8-2 for the Democrat is with I'm not sure Democrats vote. Well, they did. Yeah, they're voting 90 to. So it's huge numbers that like again, I think in the Florida poll, the pollsters said that they had not seen this kind of move among independents away from one party and to another at any time. And when you say that they could, in their polling, and when you say, yeah, it happened, with Nixon, he's dropped to lower than with independents and where Nixon was. I've been saying I only started in politics in '79. So I kind of missed that. But in my entire time in politics since 1979, I have never seen anything like this. The move with independents, it may have happened with Nixon, but I wasn't reading polls back then. But in '79 on, never seen anything like this. Never seen double haters moving this way. I mean, just that kind of split. No, this is like, again, I think what it does do is accelerates the real impulse within Trump land to throw everything they can at wrecking this election. I mean, because they know, I think they look, McLaughlin releases a poll I think on the eve of the Hungarian election, saying that Orban is going to win. He's Trump's pollster. Well, he kind of got that.
Great news for him.
Yeah, got that wrong by a big margin. So J.D. Vance, they send in to save it. They know how big this move is, and that kind of like I think probably confirmed it for them. And so, that's what I think are the biggest problem is not, first of all, people out there should be volunteering at poll places, to be poll workers, to be monitors, to be observers, to stand between the polling place and ICE if it shows up, because that's where this is if they are going to have a crushing defeat, potentially existential, in terms of just how massive it could be. And so therefore, every impulse Trump has, which is, to stay in power, to thwart that defeat, stop it any way he can. You look at what he did in January 6th, 2000. We don't need to go back there, but if he did that then, this is going to be much worse, a much bigger defeat, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of game playing before and after that election that we all need to be ready for.
Yeah. I want to dig into something you said about double haters and the Democratic Party brand, because you're right. Nationally, the polls show, Democrats are still pretty unpopular with voters, but it doesn't square with the special elections we've seen where Democrats are
Right.
posting outperformances that are historic. And it also brings Rob Sand into the conversation. I think we have a clip of your conversation with Rob Sand that I'd love to get up.
More registered Republican donors in Iowa than any of the Republicans running for governor. I mean, we literally had more grassroots support from Republicans than the Republicans did because people are hearing this message about bringing people together and about the fact that neither party is exactly knocking it out of the park. And they're like, I'm in that party. Is that a party? Can we make that a party? Like we've all been living in this reality where we're being told to hate people. And we're really at the end of the day, kind of like, well, what are you going to do for me? Right. And that resonates with a ton of people. And I think that's part of the reason that we're just taking off like a rocket.
And he is.
What is
I think
the magic behind this, right?
Yeah.
Because we see this with Abigail Spanberger, with James Tallarico in Texas, that a lot of Republicans say, I don't like Democrats, but I don't mind this person. I like them, and otherwise the other person's nuts. So how is Rob Sand tapping into that energy in Iowa?
Well, first of all, he's campaigning. He did 100 town meetings and town halls, and he's on his starting his second round of 100 of them. And he does this amazing thing where he starts the whole thing by asking how many Republicans are here. And even if it's only a few hands or if it's a lot of, he thanks them for coming and listening, and he wants to hear from them. And he's got this capacity to cut through all the bullshit, which he's kind of saw there, and get people to get, oh yeah, you're right. I don't want to be hating on my neighbor. And in rural America, people don't want to hate on their neighbors, but you've got a party that just been ginning that hate up while their prices continue to go up. They can't afford fertilizer, they can't get it even. Their gas prices or diesel prices are going up. Everything, and all because and then the only thing that the Republicans do is throw up some culture war thing to inflame them, but doesn't do anything for them or anybody else, frankly. And so, I think what's happened is people have had enough. And I think Rob Sand is tapping into that this feeling out there that there's got to be something better than this, better than both parties, the way we're both going at it. And I do think there's a lot of, he has a capacity. First of all, he won in 2018. He was the only Democrat to win statewide in the state of Iowa in a while that year. And then in 22, when he ran for re-election, they threw everything at him because they wanted to kill the only statewide Democrat there was, so that there would be no race this time. They'd keep the governorship, and he won. And then the first thing that the Republican governor and legislature did was immediately the first vote. One of the first votes was when they got back in session was to strip the auditor's office of any power to audit or to question how money was being spent or to uncover corruption or anything. And he's, Iowans it's a pretty educated state. They get it. And you don't have to connect dots on why the Republicans would have done that to the one Democrat who had the power to actually question what they're doing. And so he has this capacity. I think one of the reasons that we're going to win that Senate seat, and maybe, I think two of those House seats, House seat 1 and 3, I think we're going to win. But while I was out there, it was increasingly clear that District 2 was also in play. And I think that one is now even now with the war and everything, it's that one's in play. And I'm now hearing from friends on the ground that potentially all 4 of the Iowa House seats are now in play, like 2 fait accompli, and the other 2 are absolutely in play. And so that, I think a large part of that is first of all, he's raised a lot of money. He's got a great organization. He comes from and interestingly enough, he comes from the northern northeast corner of the state, which is very Catholic, by the way, which is even more. I was there 4 weeks ago. I think the Iran war happened. Well, maybe it was 6 weeks ago. The Iran war started after, and then on top of that, the attacks on Pope Leo and the "I'm Jesus, no, I'm a doctor" thing that's happened in the last few days, which has caused a big schism and resentment in the Catholic community and within the church. I gotta think that that's even going to put that's the 2nd district. I think that district's now an even deeper crap than it was in before. And also Hinson, the Republican senator now who replaced Joni Ernst, that's where she hails from. So even her own support may now be mucked up because of what Trump is doing with the Catholic Church right now. So I'm just saying, like, no, I mean, I think Iowa, people don't go to sleep on that place. I think the Democrats, we made a big mistake. I said at the time, big mistake by skipping Iowa. They did, by the way, I remember right, I think a guy named Barack Obama won Iowa in 2008. So I know it's not the most diverse place on the planet, but it's not like some place that we should walk away from. And so I think Rob Sand and the current crop of incredible candidates, Josh Turek, a 4-time Paralympian, 2-time gold medalist in the Paralympics, a hero in the state, a Democratic rep, and Zach Walz, who's just as stunning a record, a state senator. And they're in a very feisty Senate primary, but either one of them is in a dead heat with Hinson. And the poll that has him in a dead heat was taken prior to Iran and prior to this, whatever the hell Trump's Jesus thing is, and an attack on the Pope is. I can't see how that helped in a state like Iowa where there's a very, actually pretty diverse religious community, but a very solid Catholic community in parts of that state that I don't think can be happy at all. And I'd love to know what Hinson's been saying, if anything, except probably she didn't see the post, how most of them cover for it.
Would you say, Joe, in your professional strategic opinion, picking a fight with the Pope and Jesus Christ is not a winning strategy if you're trying to unite people who are sick of toxicity?
Yeah, no. Like, it's not the first time I've seen this, though. The first time I saw this, I was doing the race for Prime Minister of Italy, Romano Prodi against Berlusconi. And in which Berlusconi was the sitting prime minister, and we ended up defeating him. And in that race, Berlusconi said that he had announced that he had sacrificed more for the people of Italy than Jesus Christ had sacrificed for all of humanity. And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, this is because we're talking like, the Vatican's in Rome, it's, thing. And I thought, who could get more sacrilege than that, right? And then it's almost like Trump, who's I'm sure gone to school on Orban and Berlusconi, keeps pulling out these tricks that he's seen them do. It didn't work for Berlusconi, and I don't. In fact, we ended up getting by him and winning that race. But this kind of strong man, kind of like get way out there, compare yourself to Christ. I've seen it before. It didn't work in Italy. I can't believe it's going to be. I don't see what the upside is in the United States. Even a lot of MAGA and neo, in sort of Christian voices have come out calling. Obviously he pulled it down and made up the story about he thought he was a doctor. There's a great new meme out where he's a doctor taking money out of the coffers and putting it in his own pocket, which I think, as somebody said, was probably a more accurate depiction of what he's actually been doing instead of being a Christ-like figure. But that's.
And you did mention, especially in Iowa, but also in these other races, Georgia, especially Ohio, rural voters are really hurting. Not just the Iran war driving up diesel and fertilizer prices, but tariffs. We've seen small farm bankruptcies go up 46% in 2025. And Donald Trump has said basically nothing. He issued a $12 billion bailout for farmers, about 70% of which went into the pockets of big ag mega corporations. Most farmers got less than $5,000. So they are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. And they elected him in 2024 by a 2-to-1 margin because he promised to help these struggling rural communities. How can Democrats communicate to those voters who are maybe skeptical of Democrats, but who are furious at the lack of engagement they've seen from Trump?
Well, I think the other thing, though, along with what you just said, Max, is that that for the first time he's fallen underwater with white, non-college educated voters. I mean, across the board nationally. I mean, so which were also part of his. I mean, part of the whole thing was farmers in that group, and and again, I think it is that he promised them a couple of things. He promised them that, one, he was going to lower prices, fight for them, bring the money back from overseas and put it into investing in the United States and them and making their lives easier and more affordable. And instead, with tariffs and everything else, it's done the opposite. And then the second thing, obviously, and I think even more importantly, was that he wouldn't get into any more forever wars, and particularly any in the Middle East. Well, that's gone. That's not happening. He's failed that. And then also, I still think, do not underestimate within both the religious MAGA and rural communities that bought into all the stuff they were told about Epstein and the bad deeds that Democrats or somebody he did, and we're going to reveal it all, and we're going to tell you, you can trust me, I'll get you the truth. And then, nope, guess what? Hide the files, which they're still doing, and it's probably going to get worse. And so I think those three things somehow have created the problem. Now, my own view is I'm not that concerned about the, quote, Democratic brand in 2026. And that's because as I travel around the country, as I go on the ground, and we're going to have more of those shows, as you look at people like Rob Sand, Turek, Walz, the people that are running, the candidates that we have running in those 3 or 4 House seats in Iowa, we have really great candidates who reflect the community and the people and the issues, the rural or otherwise, where they're running. And that's why I think, I'm here in Alabama today. Doug Jones is a lot of, just like what happened with Rob. What Rob was saying was more Republicans have given him, contributed $10, $20, $25, $100 to him than had given to the entire Republican field combined. So more Republicans are, the same thing in Alabama. The number of Republicans who are rallying around the kind of character and civility and bringing people together message of Doug Jones And you're seeing this not just here, but David Jolly in Florida. You're seeing it in Senate races. And I think Sherrod Brown. I think you look at, and then you look at Maine and Susan Collins, and whether we'll see what happens in that primary up there. But I would not want to be a Republican senator in this election. I think so. My point is, I think when you look at the candidates that are running out, including an independent in Montana who could maybe giving Republicans fits there, there's all these cracks where it's the candidate versus the Republican incumbent, and the candidates that we recruited or that decided they're going to run and are winning these primaries are not candidates outside of the realm of their locality or their state. They really are not reflecting a national Democratic Party, but what their values are in the state, and they are, like Rob's saying, leading by big leading like Ossoff in Georgia. It's working so well for him that no one even talks about that race anymore. There are other candidates like that around the country. So where the Democratic brand, I keep telling people, because again, I've done this since '79, the Democratic brand never gets changed in an off-year midterm election. It is candidate to candidate, district to district, and in the 26 districts that we need to fight in, we've got great candidates. And by the way, it goes beyond 26. There's great candidates. We're going to win more than that number of seats, in my view. But save the tape and come yell at me later. But I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. The thing that happens is, and you saw this, by the way, with Trump. So they lose with McCain and Romney to Obama, and then they do the big look at autopsy and they needed to change, right, postmortem, and we've got to become more compassionate and more this, that, and the other thing. And I don't know, 16 candidates run for president of the United States. They've all read the damn autopsy and what we need to do as a party. Yeah, well, Donald Trump doesn't agree with that. Screw you. And he upends the entire thing. And that's the brand of the Republican Party, which has now become more toxic than the Democratic brand. What happens is someone like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, somebody gets the nomination. And when they do, and there's a huge fight, we'll have a huge fight, AOC, Gavin Newsom, Whitmer, whoever. There'll be all kinds of people running, Wes Moore, great field, Mayor Pete. We'll have a huge fight, and whoever wins that battle, gets the most Democrats to rally around them, will be the definer of the party in a way that Clinton, I don't know whether you like Clinton or not, he changed the party in the face of it, and the dynamics of the issues that we were fighting on in a way that won us the White House for 2 terms, and then you, like I said, we may nominate an AOC, and I'm not predicting anything, but AOC or Andy Beshear, that's two different views of the future of the Democratic Party. The winner of that fight, and there'll be many others, and there'll be hopefully some new faces that we haven't seen, that will decide whether we're still toxic or whether this got fixed, whether there was a candidate who was out there with a real immigration reform message that captured the imagination beyond mass deportations of everybody. And also took on the no open borders. But got people to credibly see that as that person as we'll see.
And Nancy Johnson here on Facebook in the comments saying the Republicans passed all of Trump's bills. They are responsible for this mess. Yeah. And on that very true note, Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with us. I feel like this is a master's education in how you strategize an enemy that's making mistakes.
Well, it's great to have you leading here. because I hate to do that. And I'm happy just that we could have this great discussion. Really look forward to more, Max. Thanks for hosting this.
Likewise, and thank you all in the comments and who are watching both live and who will watch in replay. You've been watching Strategy Session. I'm Max Burns. My guest has been the great strategist, Joe Trippi. Go back to check us out on YouTube, on Substack at Lincoln Square, and stay tuned because there's a whole lot more Lincoln Square ahead.